Hello, everyone. Rhys and Jeff Tiefer, Tiller Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics. Awesome guest today, Matt Harmon, longtime friend of the pair of us. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff and Rhys. It's good to be back with you guys. It feels like August has really just kind of slapped me in the face this year because I don't know about you guys. I have gone it felt like every week I felt a completely different emotion as it pertained to whether football was going to start on time, what the season was going to look like. I mean, I still have no idea what the season's going to look like, but now sort of mentally preparing like, hey, training camps are here, drafts are happening. It's a very weird feeling because it's just different than normal and also feels much like this offseason, so much more truncated than normal too.
Oh, yeah. And I do think it'll be nobody cares. Now everybody cares at Labor Day
Yeah.
or something like
Right.
that,
Yeah. It's going to be fast paced. It's going to be crazy. And I think, it's going to be hard to spot edges too. Like, I don't know if paying attention the entire offseason and tracking guys, like Marquise Brown or players that are, very the fantasy hive mind's very excited about. I don't know if there's going to be an advantage to that or an advantage to coming in super late because you'll have distilled all the noise. And I think this will be the noisiest preseason there's no preseason, but, draft period, fantasy draft period of all time because, things like, I don't know, like one of the beat writers saw Todd Gurley with a limp, walking around. And like that was being treated as like hardcore concrete news. That's really not normal. Normally we'd have like some act like, hey, Gurley's getting 40% of the reps with the first team. This is not good. Brian Hill's out there. Ito Smith is out there. We're not getting any of that this year. And we're certainly not going to get it in preseason games. So this is going to be not just a season like any other, but really a fantasy prep season unlike any other too.
Yeah, you remember the Fat Eddie Lacy pictures and
Oh yeah,
all that stuff? Yeah. And so that's what made me think of it. So Matt, when we say that Matt's a longtime friend, Matt showed us around some of the studio 4 years ago, if you can believe that, Matt. 4 years ago.
It seems a lot longer than that.
And so Matt got a shout out in Rhys's the kudos in Rhys's book.
Yes.
And so in case those people haven't been under a rock, Matt just got back from the East Coast. He proposed to his now fiance.
Went out with a girlfriend, came back with a fiance.
Hey, man. Hey, was that the first time your parents had met her?
No, not first time my parents had met her. First time that like my older sisters had met her. So, it was really what I want. I mean, we both wanted to kind of have my family be a big part of that moment because, we live out here. Her family is like 25 minutes down the road. So we see her parents all the time. I think it was really kind of a special thing for my parents to be a part of that.
Awesome. So let's jump in. Reception Perception. That is like the Harmon brand, along with the beard and the slick back hair. Yeah. And it's the brand, right? And
well, let's hope so. It's been more than 6 years worth of work gone into it. It better be part of the brand.
Oh, by the way, your ears should have been burning a few weeks ago. We had a couple weeks, maybe the last week, had Scott Barrett on with his DFB, and the BYB of Harmon's was mentioned. And so, all of us have a story of how we got where we're at. Rhys, why don't you tee off on one of Matt's favorite receivers?
Because we all know how much you absolutely hate A-Rob. I'm just going to bring him up, too. Because, that hate's real deep.
Yeah, it goes deep. Definitely, definitely a deep hatred there for sure.
What question you got for him?
Are you higher on A-Rob this year with Foles there, or than you have been in the past, like, I don't know, last year when he was getting adjusted to the system, he just come up, the Bears just came off a 12-4 year. Are you higher on him this year than years past?
I think the exciting part about Robinson this year is like last year we got to see the floor, right? Which was what he looks like with a bad quarterback. And, I think, and he's actually quite familiar with working with bad quarterbacks, back to his days at Penn State, Christian Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, maybe some other dust balls down there in Jacksonville that got into the run on obviously Mitchell Trubisky this past year. What was cool, number one, I think what I love, Rhys, that the Bears do with Allen Robinson is that they move him around the field a decent amount. You know, he takes a good amount of snaps in the slot, which is very different than the way that they used him in Jacksonville. In Jacksonville, they really just had him line up with, as the ISO X receiver, never moved him, faced a lot of press coverage, still faces a lot of, tight press man coverage on the outside as the number one receiver in Chicago, but they get him so many more favorable matchups in Chicago, and that really helped him access that floor production last year, which was, over 90 catches, 150 targets in a Trubisky-led offense, but, at about 11 yards per catch. So I think you can feel good about him this year because you know what that floor looks like. But if Foles gets in there, then we're talking about maybe an unknown ceiling. And I don't know what you feel about Nick Foles, but I'm not like the biggest Nick Foles fan, but he definitely is more willing to go down the field than Mitchell Trubisky is. Over 20% of his passes have been deep passes throughout his career. I think that could really unlock some of that deep game prowess that we saw from Robinson in Jacksonville that we haven't yet seen in Chicago yet. So I actually have him ranked very aggressively as my wide receiver 5 this year, right there in the second tier, ahead of guys that are, up above him in ADP. So yes, I would say I'm ranking him at my ceiling, and I'm once again very excited this year.
Well, with Foles, back in 2013, a long, long time ago, he put up huge fantasy numbers, only 2 picks with over 25 touchdown passes. But his quarterback coach is now in Chicago to help
Correct.
him out. So he could be, not saying he'll put similar numbers, but there is a good chance he will be a whole lot better than what people are saying.
I think with Foles too, there's so much familiarity just across the coaching staff because he had a stint in Kansas City where Matt Nagy was also coaching. John DeFilippo's there. He's got familiarity, obviously, with Nick Foles. Bill Lazor's the quarterback coach, like you're talking about. He's there as the OC. There's a lot. Like, I think that Trubisky, probably because of like I said, the messed up nature of this offseason, is probably the favorite to start week 1 because there's not going to really be a long camp battle. There's not going to be preseason games. But I think that familiarity with the system from a head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach level, then we're looking at a situation where Foles could be in there sooner than later.
So the two things I hear you say is, and I'm reading between the lines, I'm putting words in your mouth with a smile on my face, is that you mentioned last year as his floor, yet his ADP is much higher or lower, let's say, than what his floor showed last year. I mean, he was wide receiver, 8 last year, something like that?
Yeah, depending on your format, yep.
And he's being drafted at 12 or 13 or something of that nature, right?
Yeah, right now on 444's ADP ranking, he's wide receiver 11, across multiple sites. And last year he finished in Yahoo standard scoring, which is half point PPR. He was wide receiver 11. So he's either below or right in line with that floor. So I think he's a very comfortable pick there.
Right, and third round pick usually, right?
Yeah.
And the other piece to that with me on Foles is Foles, wherever he's been, has had a receiver finish pretty strong.
Yep.
In the 80, in the final wide receivers. So I'm pretty confident that Foles is better than Trubisky. And Foles is, let's just say he can be a middle of the road Andy Dalton starter. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, I think Foles is a product of his ecosystem, much like Andy Dalton is. When Dalton has great supporting cast, he's a good, productive quarterback. I think we've seen, Philadelphia Nick Foles from the Chip Kelly era, like Rhys is mentioning. That's a good quarterback, good ecosystem when Kelly was kind of taking the league by storm. Obviously, the second iteration of Nick Foles in Philadelphia, good ecosystem with Doug Peterson. Very good quarterback. They win a Super Bowl. Jacksonville Nick Foles, St. Louis Rams Nick Foles, bad ecosystems, bad quarterback. I think Chicago is like kind of somewhere in between because of the system familiarity, like I mentioned, and also Robinson's an elite receiver, in my opinion. I think Anthony Miller's in line for a breakout year this year. So they have it's not as good as some of those great Eagles teams, but I think they have enough there for Foles to be a competent quarterback. And quite frankly, Robinson has never played with a competent quarterback yet to this point.
Middle of the road's fine. Do you have any follow-ups on Robinson?
I'm good.
You're good.
Wait, actually, I do have one.
All right.
Well, Allen Robinson actually led the league in target share inside the red zone So with that plus Foles, not bad at throwing fades if you've been able to throw to Alshon Jeffrey a lot back in his Eagles days.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have a good red zone floor. So
yeah, I think that's what's so exciting about Robinson is that he gets the type of targets that you want in fantasy football. I just had Rich Rebar on the Yahoo Fantasy Football podcast this week, and he wrote a really good article about, you don't just want guys with target volume, like you want guys that are getting high leverage targets, deep targets. You want guys that are getting percentage of targets in the end zone, percentage of targets in the red zone. And he studied like with the type of targets you want. And Robinson was the only player in top 15 in all of those categories. So full field guy there. Another player from that article I think you have a question about too is Tyler Lockett. So he's another guy that you're never going to get the type of or the number of targets you want, but he's going to get the type of targets you want. Robinson happens to be the type of guy that gets the type of targets and the raw number of targets that you want.
So let's transition to Lockett, a guy that never gets his due, right?
Agree. Yep.
He's small, he's skinny. We had Graham Barfield on a few days ago, and talking about Marquise Brown, and everybody's worried about the weight. And I was like, well, it's not like Lockett's a heavy dude, or
right.
Everybody worries about size, and no matter who does the metrics, whatever style, yours or someone else's, it seems like Lockett comes to the top on all of them. It's just strange. But then the fantasy community won't rank him very high. It's right. an odd dynamic, don't you think?
Well, I think it's all because of, like I said, in the Seattle offense, you can never project Lockett for 120 or 130 type of targets, and that's typically what people want out of their top 12 receivers. But getting targets from Russell Wilson is different than getting targets from every other quarterback. I mean, he's always producing pass catchers that are hyper efficient. Lockett is right up there. Last year was really, I think, kind of the coming together of Tyler Lockett as a superstar type of player. Reception perception's always been, like we talk about Allen Robinson as a reception perception favorite. Lockett was kind of that next guy as that 2015 rookie. The methodology has always pointed to the fact that he was going to become that superstar player. I think last year, that's when it really came together. In 2019, Lockett finished number 5 in terms of success rate versus man coverage, and number 3 in terms of success rate versus press. So he's a full field guy that does win vertically, that does get to line up inside too, and does get those type of targets that you want. I have Lockett ranked, I think, wide receiver 12 this year. I'm very, very high on him. And when he gets to the 4th round, which he often does, he's like an auto pick for me.
So are you not at all worried about DK Metcalf taking up some red zone targets?
Or Disley?
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens with the tight ends. Metcalf is a good player to bring up because I actually think these two guys can be pretty similar to what the Bucs did last year with Godwin and Evans, because again, they're never like the way the Bucs threw the ball last year, the amount of times they threw the ball, Seattle's never going to do that. Like, it doesn't even, like, Russell Wilson's out there today saying, like, I'd like to treat every quarter like it's the 4th quarter. Pete Carroll, it's not going to happen. Just not happening, right? But at the same time, I think that these two guys can actually split the target share, 50-50. Like, these two guys alone can account for 50% of Seattle's overall targets. I'm not worried about David Moore or any of these other guys on the wide receiver depth chart. I think Greg Olsen can carve out a fine role, but he's not going to be getting the type of volume he was in Carolina. And we'll see about Will Disley, Jacob Hollister, where those guys factor in. But I think you can comfortably project Tyler Lockett for maybe somewhere around 110, 115 targets, and DK Metcalf, who already got 100 targets last year, 105, maybe 110 type of range. Very similar as a 1A, 1B to what the Bucs duo was last year. And there was really no one else in Tampa Bay's passing game that mattered. I don't think there's going to be anybody that matters in Seattle's passing game this year. So I think you can comfortably project those guys. And just so we're on Metcalf too, interesting note about DK Metcalf. I always like to bring this up with him because, there are a lot of people that said he couldn't run routes or wasn't going to separate as an NFL player, and that he was very limited in what he could do. True. Seattle really did limit his assignment, as a year one player. 63% of his snaps came at left wide receiver, just on that one side of the field. That was the highest of any outside receiver sampled in 2019. 53% of his charted routes and reception perception were either just a slant or a 9 route. But who cares? Because the player that is so similar to that, in my mind, in the reception perception database, peak Dez Bryant, 2014 Dez Bryant, awesome separator, just like Metcalf was, not because they're these nuanced route runners, but because they're just hyper physical beasts. And 57% of Dez's routes in 2014 were either a slant, a 9, or a post. Again, very similar players, very similar kind of archetypes. I like Metcalf to become that Dez Bryant type player too.
Piling on that, I think that we in the fantasy community get way bogged down on who can run what, because take Ruggs coming in this year.
Sure.
I don't know if he'll have a great season or not, but his route tree will be enough if, I was going to say Oakland, if Vegas gets him the right kind of targets, right?
Right.
It's up to the coaching staff to get that player. I look at Tyreek Hill. Nobody criticizes his route tree, do they? They just go, hey, Andy Reid knows how to get the ball to him.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in you're in a draft. You mentioned 4th round, auto pick Lockett. You choose Lockett or DK?
I'm taking Lockett before Metcalf, only because I think he's a better player right now, and I think he's more accustomed to he's going to get more efficient targets as a slot receiver than Metcalf is as an outside ISO X receiver.
And with Carson being injured some, and Penny, I don't mind that stack in a season long of both receivers plus Russ in the 8th, 9th.
Yeah.
I don't think that's bad at all. Do you?
No, I mean, there's just so much touchdown potential there. Like, no matter how not often Russ throws the ball, he's one of the leaders in touchdown rate every single year because, I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I think the touchdowns are going to go to Lockett, and I think they're going to go to Metcalf.
So you start your draft with running back, Kelsey, running back, the Seattle duo. That's a decent start. And then Russ later.
I agree.
That's a decent start. What are you thinking, Rhys?
Lockett and Metcalf. Metcalf's more of the bigger type of person that in their division with Jalen Ramsey and Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson for that matter, he will command that kind of attention that will allow Lockett to run free on those slot cornerbacks, because I'm pretty sure they'll throw a flag if Nick Cole, Robbie Coleman body slams someone again.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I think DK can actually be good news for Tyler Lockett, because it puts the defense in a bind, right? Do you want to try to – you can't really double cover a guy like Lockett in the slot, because it's just you're going to be screwing up the rest of your defense. But are you going to then double DK Metcalf, or because then you're going to leave yourself with just a lot of space in the middle of the field for Tyler Lockett to eat up on those deep posts and everything like that. So it does put defenses in a bind, that's for sure.
And I do see Seattle running some 12 this year. I mean, they're run heavy anyway, but with Disley and Olsen, I could see running some 12.
Or 22.
Yep. Or 22, yeah.
Or, 21.
21, yep. All right, moving on. Last receiver. Who are you thinking, Rhys?
McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin. What are you thinking about him this year? Do you worry about quarterback?
Oh man, I love Terry McLaurin. He's my favorite breakout receiver this year. If you'll indulge me here, I'm going to pull up his, which I always have handy. I'm going to pull up his awesome reception perception stats from this past year before we talk about the quarterback play and everything like that, because I think that's something worth discussing too. McLaurin last year posted a 76% success rate versus man coverage. That's at the 89th percentile in terms of receivers charted since 2014. 79.7% against press. That's the 93rd percentile. His success rate versus man coverage score among rookies was the 4th best ever, bested only by Odell, the aforementioned Tyler Lockett, and Calvin Ridley. Against press, 3rd best score among rookies. The only 2 players to beat him were, again, Odell Beckham and Michael Thomas, 2 pretty good wide receivers. That success rate versus man coverage score is the 34th best among all players charted since 2014. that's over 250 players in there. So, I mean, and also he's great at the catch point. You've seen him make these fantastic one-handed catches, great concentration in the contested catch game. I think he has it all. I think he can be a true full field number one receiver. And now when it comes to Dwayne Haskins, that's a question worth asking, but we really only need Dwayne Haskins to be passable for McLaurin to absolutely go wild this year from a production standpoint. And if you look at the last 3 games, Haskins was pretty solid, decent completion percentage, over 8 yards per attempt. McLaurin goes over 270 yards in those 3 games. So we see when Haskins is good, McLaurin can be productive. And also it's worth noting, just if you take his rate stats, like catch rate, yards per reception, whatever, when Haskins was in the game last year for eight contests between the two, and you give McLaurin a 23% target share of the projected attempts in Washington this year, you're going to get like 80 catches, over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. I think those numbers are well within reach because Washington's going to throw the ball a lot. Not only do they stink, like they're not going to be a very good team, so they're going to be in pass-heavy game scripts. Last year, Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator for the Panthers at the end of the year, and now the offensive coordinator for Washington, he had a 64% passing rate in neutral game scripts when the games were close. So that's the way he wants to play, and I think you can easily pencil in McLaurin for that. Last year, he has a 22% share. It's 22, 23%. This year, we're talking about 120 targets at a bare minimum. I have him at wide receiver 13 this year. I have him. I mean, again, if he's in there the back half of the 4th round after Lockett's off the board, that's the way I want to go.
So 2 or 3 things, and I have a question for Rhys. Rhys done a little study on Carolina last year. So the other piece to it that everybody seemed, well, I don't see it mentioned enough, but Haskins and McLaurin, college teammates. There's chemistry there. Second of all, the new offense isn't going to matter. Steven Sims, the only competition for receptions. No tight end. Look at the
Nothing there.
Look at the vacated targets. I think Rhys looked it up.
187 vacated targets, not counting Kelvin Harmon going down.
Yeah,
That's
my poor cousin.
40.6
Hang on,
targets.
that's his cousin. They have a similarity.
Yeah, maybe the name. I don't think athletically we're similar.
Well, you might be able to outrun him now that he's injured, but you know.
Yeah, maybe now. Maybe now.
But how many? All right, so let's get back to that. How many vacated targets?
187, 40.6% of all their targets. They're now gone.
Yeah.
With 8 inside the 10, as you were talking about with the targets that mean the most, 8 of those, or 25.8%, are now gone. Then they're probably going to have to go somewhere.
And nobody else was brought in, right? I mean, it's just McLaurin and Steven Sims. They're
maybe Anthony
Gandy Golden.
Yeah.
Or Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas. Shout out to Logan Thomas, converted tight end and the pride of EC Glass High School in Lynchburg, Virginia, where I went to college.
Oh, my. Home of some lemonade, I'm sure.
Different Lynchburg.
Oh, but Gibson, Gandy Golden, those guys, I mean, it's still – I think that target share is even going to go higher because it's even losing Chris Thompson. That's a big deal.
84 targets in 11 games. I mean, over first base. It was 84 targets.
So, Rhys, what was the Panthers, were they second in pass attempts last year?
They're second in pass dropbacks. That included sacks. But
Kyle Allen got himself sacked a lot, so yeah.
Well, Christian McCaffrey, their number 1, had 142 targets. DJ Moore, their number 2, had 135. Mm-hmm. So, Scott Turner just likes to give the ball to his players and don't worry about anybody else.
Best players.
Yes, they're studs. So, McLaurin could easily be in line for 140 targets.
Yeah, like I see 120 as the bare minimum.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, he's one of those guys that just how bad Washington is, and they're the punchline for any kind of joke, right?
Right.
Especially since that's your hometown team. We won't bring that up.
I distance myself completely from that.
And then you move to the Panthers, and now the Panthers coaching staff goes there just to help you out. And
little weird, like, in terms of, I think Ron Rivera is great to like turn that culture around, but a little weird how he like completely brought in a lot of guys from the medical staff, from the scouting side, from Carolina. It's like, I don't know that like running back the 2019 Panthers even traded for my guy, Kyle Allen. Not my guy, just to be clear. I don't know how like much of a good strategy running back like the 2019 Panthers is without Cam Newton, but that's neither here nor there.
Oh yeah. And, I do think though, he'll turn around the culture. It's a pretty soft division.
Yeah.
And
there's only one good cornerback in that division, and that's Darius Slay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So,
big money, man.
Big money. So, Matt, we appreciate your time. We know this is a busy time of year. What do you have working at Yahoo? What are you working on right now?
Literally right now, like right before we hopped on to do the show, and right after I get off the show, I'm going to be finishing up my wide receiver tiers. So analysis on Lockett, McLaurin, Robinson, and pretty much anybody else you want. You're going to find it in there. That should post tonight. And yeah, that's kind of I'm working through the tiers right now. Like I said, finally, we've got the opt-out deadline passed. It looks like camp is starting on time. Things are happening. It's time to put these out. Usually they would have been done a while ago, but I had to hold them back a little for all the, breaking news and stuff like that. If somebody, like Odell Beckham had opted out or something, would have changed these tiers, the projections. But that's kind of the big thing right now. I'll be posting those the next couple of weeks. Actually just did an exciting interview today. If anyone wants to check it out, it should be posted tomorrow with former Packers receiver Greg Jennings. We had quite a wide receiver geek out sesh on the podcast. So check that out tomorrow too.
Tears for Fears, huh?
Exactly.
And so you have any questions or closing remarks for the bearded wonder over there?
Just going back to McLaurin, even though his ADP is somewhere around like wide receiver 28. So
yeah,
he's being drafted as a low end wide receiver 3 with, as Matt mentioned, with 120 target minimum. He's easily going to be a wide receiver 2. He's stealing.
Is he a 6th round pick ADP?
Thereabouts, round 5, round 6, depending on the source that you look at. Yeah, right now, again, that 4 for 4 ADP I referenced earlier, 5.2 in 12-team leagues, 6.10 in 10-team leagues, and that, like Rhys said, high wide receiver 3, low wide receiver 2 range, perfect range there to take him.
So Matt would love to start running back. A-Rob at the early 3rd, come back 4th, hit Lockett, make the corner, start the 5th with McLaurin. Would that be a fair start for Mr. Harmon?
I would love that, but I feel like everybody that I draft with is not going to allow me to do that. Although I did in the Apex Writers League.
A-Rob in the 3rd.
I took A-Rob in the 2nd because that league is like wide receiver thirsty because it's a PPR and you can start like 6 or 7 receivers. So that one you've got to know like receivers are going fast. So I took Robinson in the 2nd there, and then towards the back end of the 2nd round, and then I went back in the 4th round and took Lockett, but did not get to Terry McLaurin. Had to take another guy that I'm really high on in Michael Gallup from the Cowboys.
Yes.
We both, Rhys and I, are big Gallup fans. Only that
he's one of the cheapest.
Yeah, he was one of the cheapest, and he finished low end receiver 1, high end receiver 2 last year, and gets no love.
Rhys, you got all the good nugs and all the good stats. So let me drop one here just to try to one up you. Last year, Michael Gallup actually had a higher percentage of the team air yards and the percentage of the team targets in the games that he played than Amari Cooper did.
Yes, he was on pace for like 10 extra targets, and he's cheaper by like 6 rounds.
By a significant amount. I mean, like, give me Gallup in round, 6, 7, wherever he goes, as opposed to wherever Cooper is going higher in the draft.
Yes, and I could even see the Cowboys locking up Gallup more than Cooper in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, they just handed Cooper that fat contract extension, but I could see by the end of Gallup's rookie deal that they give him a decent one too. Because I mean, he already had 1,100 yards as a second-year player. I feel like he's not getting enough credit, regardless of like fantasy. He's not getting enough credit for what an awesome like young player he's already developed into. And he plays that X receiver spot, which is much harder to play than Cooper going around playing flanker and in the slot or whatever too. He's definitely a really good ascending young player.
the other piece on Cooper is I don't think he got enough guaranteed money that it's going to last that many years.
Oh, for sure.
And so that's what I was thinking is I could see Gallup being there much longer than Cooper.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Any closing remarks for Matt? Matt, it's great having you. Thank you. Congratulations on the engagement.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you having me. It's good to stop in, check in with two of my favorite guys in the business. Really appreciate it. Rhys, keep kicking butt over there, man. And, don't let your dad boss you around too much.
Oh, it's the other way around.
You gotta let him fly, Jeff. You gotta let him free a little.
This podcast.
Rhys is shaking his head on that one.
This podcast has his name on it, not mine, for a reason. So trying to let him fly, even though he's 14 and needs to come down a couple pegs. He's not quite as tall as Harmon, but he's a lot taller than he was last time you saw him. He now touches 6 foot, and so,
I feel like he's taller than like last time I was on the podcast, like 4 months ago.
He just got the hair snit, much to his chagrin.
Yes.
So,
that was their idea, not mine.
Oh, let me tell you, that was the number one fight I had with my mom ever of all time was the hair. My senior year of high school, I'll share this story. My senior year of high school, you got to take your senior pictures or whatever. Yeah. And I had this like long hair, mine was like down to my shoulders at the time. And, it was a mess. She was like, you can keep your hair, but you have to blow dry it for your senior pictures. And I was like, I'm not blow drying my hair, screaming about it. So I blow dried my hair and took my senior pictures, and they're terrible. They're just awful. So, yeah. That was the fight we always had, was about the hair length.
Mine is only that I want him not to be embarrassed when he's older about what his hair looks like. You know what I mean?
Doesn't matter. You won't be embarrassed when I'm staring down 30 now next year, and you won't be embarrassed when you look back at yourself.
No, 30, man, you're getting old.
I know, I'm getting up there.
Hey, great having you. Get back on those tiers, and hope to have you back in a few weeks after the season gets rolling, if you can spare time for us.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a good one, Matt.
Bye.
Take care.